What's something you had to explain to someone that you thought was common knowledge? Once watched an intern, who was nevertheless a whole adult with a college degree, throw an entire stapler away because it ran out of staples. Genuinely blew her mind when I fished it out and showed her how to open it up and refill. I had to explain to an ex that when the GPS warned there was a disabled vehicle ahead, it meant there was a car on the side of the road, and not that Google was warning us that someone with a disability was driving a car. I'll never forget how stunned I was when he asked, "How does Google know they're disabled?" My college roommates when I lived in a big shared house were pretty much all foreign students from really wealthy backgrounds. Like half of them told me they had maids back home that pretty much took care of everything for them. Some of the things I've had to explain: we do not have to contact the landlord to change the dead light bulb. How to do your own laundry. You're not supposed to flush anything besides toilet paper. A bag of very sour-smelling shredded carrots has indeed gone bad. Years back, I went over to my buddy's house to hang out and watch a game. He asked if I wanted some French fries. I said absolutely. Half a goes by, and I can hear from the living room that he's having some issues. I went into the kitchen and asked what's wrong. He can't figure out how to fry these French fries. I look over, and this goon is trying to make fries in a pot of boiling water. It didn't dawn on this stooge that you needed oil of some sort. I still have no idea how he's made it to 40. My husband and I both had to explain to my father, in his 60s with a PhD, that the reason that I hated unloading the dishwasher as a child was not because I was a lazy kid. I was 8 years old and cleaning pretty much the whole house with my siblings, but because my dad absolutely refuses to put knives in blade down, which means they're always blade up. Both my husband and I had to explain that not only is this incredibly dangerous, I can't tell you how many times I sliced my fingers open as a child, starting around 5 or 6 years old, because of this, and would cry about it, only to be smacked for being lazy, but unsanitary. Handle up, blade down applies for all cutlery, although wash your hands before unloading regardless. My husband is truly baffled that he's made it 60 years with the highest degree you can get, and yet can't get why loading a dishwasher with knives blade up is a bad idea, specifically with children in the house. Lamb comes from sheep. Pork comes from pigs and bacon as well. Beef is cow, and eggs are not made in a factory. Seriously, this was a fast food place I worked in, and the kids that came in there. Let's say you didn't even want them in a job where they asked you if you'd like fries with that, because some of them didn't even know what a potato was. There's so much misinformation about autism regarding things which should be common knowledge by now. For example, many people mistakenly believe that autistic people don't feel emotions or can't understand emotions or both, or that being autistic means that you must have some sort of latent human superpower, such as being able to remember the entire layout of a city after witnessing it only once, or being able to recite the entire works of Aristotle, etc. The truth is that autistic people feel just as many emotions as regular people do, that they aren't completely incapable of picking up on emotions, and that many autistic people don't have any special super abilities at all. Niche or specific interests, yes, but often not noticeably beyond the abilities regular specialists in that subject area. The spectrum is a spectrum, and it's not as clear cut as what many people are led to believe by popular media. In our 20s, one of our friends did not understand ethnicity very well. We were all talking about where our ancestors, we're Americans, came from, such as Germany, Ireland, or England. He said his came from Texas. We thought he was joking and pressed further, asking where his relatives a few generations back came from. He looked uncomfortable. It never occurred to him that his very white ancestors didn't originate in Texas. All of this stuff is taught in school, many grades, so we cannot blame the schools. This is a case of maybe not being the brightest. You know how world maps have Russia on one side of the map and North America on the other? I had to remind someone that Eastern Russia is actually very close to Alaska because the world is round. I think the person knew that the world is round, but when they looked at the flat map on the wall, they weren't making the connection that this was a flat representation of a round world. Chernobyl actually happened and is not just fictional horror stories. My ethnicity is Jamaican. I remember talking to a friend about how my family feels about moving back home. We live in the US, by the way. She proceeded to say, "Girl, isn't Jamaica all the way in Africa? That's too far." I paused and looked at her because I didn't think she was serious. She was serious, so I had to explain to her that the West Indies and Africa are two completely different places on different sides of the globe. I always thought that the Caribbean and Africa were distinctly different. I was proven wrong that day. Played Rocket League with a guy from Georgia, the state, the other day. We got to talking politics and I randomly brought up how my area has a serious coyote problem. They're starting to go after adults. And he told me I should carry a pistol on me just in case. I explained to him that it's illegal to shoot a gun in my town. Coyotes are a protected species, and I don't have a concealed weapon. I can only carry my gun around unloaded, can only be loaded at home over the range. Dude went on to say that he had 50 guns and definitely knew more than me, and then explained to me that it's actually part of the Constitution, and that I will always have immunity, as long as I'm acting in self-defense. And then started ranting about how liberals like me don't really understand guns and asked me if I thought an AR-15 was an assault rifle. So basically, I explained to a gun nut that state gun laws exist and that killing someone with a gun in self-defense is not a black and white constitutional right. Not exactly common knowledge for a lot of people, but I feel like that's extremely common knowledge for anyone who owns a gun. I had to explain the phrase Achilles heel to my ex-wife. The reference was used on a show and she said, "That sounds stupid." I had to ask if she knew what Achilles heel refers to and she responded no. After explaining, she said, "That still sounds stupid." This is not why she is my ex-wife, but this ego trip certainly contributed to my decision. I had to explain to my wife that the reason she was not getting very dry after drying off after the shower was that you have to actually dry yourself off with the towel, not just wrap it around you. That the earth rotates, and that's how day and night happens to an old classmate. They said I was lying and I was a nerd until they looked it up themselves. How to use a debit card. I worked at a gas station toward the end of college. Some regular guy who looked like every other Midwestern dad came in and had no idea how to use his debit card. He even announced his PIN out loud, thinking I needed it behind the counter. Maybe an alien's first day on Earth. That Reddit isn't a fair or neutral source of news and information. Who the Pope is, not literary who, but he concept, so to speak, had to explain there is a Roman Catholic Church and its leader is the Pope. I had to explain the difference between AM and PM. To a patient, it took 5 minutes for this woman to get it. It was one of the dumbest conversations that I've had with a stranger. It always blows me away when I have to explain to someone how to use the poop knife. I just figured every household had one, only ever been in a few that didn't. That you don't pee out of the vagina. I had a med student cuss me out when I told him. I had to show him a medical diagram to shut him up. I knew someone who didn't realize until they were an adult that spiders made spider webs. They thought they were just something that appeared over time, like dust, and spiders would often inhabit them. Paris, France is in Europe, believing this to be common knowledge. I had to explain to two relatives it was not a country in of itself. The same conversation led me to explain to them that Egypt is in fact in Africa. I use myself as an example. I never made my bed as a kid. I have a weird mix of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and ODD, where I won't do shit without people telling me why, and I hate it because I said so. When I turned 23, I asked my mom out the blue, "Why do people make their beds?" And she replied, "So the beds and pillows don't get dirty." Afterwards, I made my bed daily. I was one of those gifted kids in school, but I really hope in the future for parents that just because your kid is smarter than normal doesn't mean you take a slightly less hands-on approach. Teach us still, we need it. As someone doing a physics degree, surrounded by people doing physics degrees at uni, I roomed with 6 of them and a family who has a generally high level of basic scientific knowledge. Probably because I did a physics degree and gushed enthusiastically at every opportunity. I was genuinely shocked to meet someone who didn't know what a black hole was. Genuinely has to sit down and realize I actually has a lot of specialized scientific knowledge and not everyone is interested in gravitational waves. Shook me to my core. I'd like to say it changed me as a person, but since then I've blithely continued assuming everyone I meet knows a lot about the life cycle of stars. My roommate, 20, and I, 21, decided to split cleaning duties in our apartment when we moved in. One day, I cleaned the sink and counters while she was out. When she came home, I asked her if she could clean the stove top. She said yes, but then looked me dead in the eyes and said, "How do I do that?" I had to explain to her how to clean a stovetop. I really thought it was common knowledge until that day. That pillow covers cover both the front and the back of the pillow, not just the top. We found out this guy in my dorm put the pillowcase on top of his pillow instead of putting the pillow inside his pillowcase. This was 3 months into dorm living. Guy didn't even know. The bumpy backside of your toothbrush is for brushing your tongue. I knew a girl who had no idea it was for your tongue, and she said she used it to brush her gums. friend thought thunder was made by clouds running into each other. I asked them about it after I explained where thunder actually came from. They are actually incredibly intelligent. It's just they heard that reasoning one day when they never stopped to think about it, and the concept never came up again until that random conversation in our 20s. They were incredibly embarrassed afterwards, but not it's a fun inside joke. Had to explain to my previous boyfriend, male 29, that when you buy health insurance, you can't just claim off it straight away, and that there are waiting periods. Otherwise, everyone who has to have costly medical treatments would just sign up and cancel again after claiming money off it. That Africa is not country. I still believe I encounter tons of people who believe. How the did they graduate? Also, eating enough apple seeds could kill you because they have cyanide. I don't know about you all, but I know that since I was 9. That the sun is not as big as the moon because she thought since they look the same in the sky, they are the same size. She was 23 years old. The fact that Tylenol, paracetamol, and acetaminophen are the same thing. Also, that corn is a grain, not a vegetable, and potato is a starch. I had to explain to a college student, early 90s, that the band Inks was not pronounced inks, but pronounced in excess. I laughed for a good 10 minutes on that one. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe.